Hey guys, hey, it's Whiskey Girl here with my bootleg alien costume that we can file under shit that didn't fit from Amazon. But that's the beauty of virtual, that you can't see what's going on underneath here. There are no snaps happening, nothing's closed. I mean, it's all a mess. But ideally, I would be wearing the red number from the video yesterday because I'm going to talk about ego and narcissism. And that was my little like ego dance situation. But I chose to have a good time yesterday and I did not feel like recording this video. So um, I'm up, I put on some blue makeup, very 80s, and I'm here in my alien guise, and I want to talk about healing from narcissism. So hopefully we can get through this really quickly. There is Remy in my coffee, so I'm a little worried about that and how the video is going to go. Y'all know I don't edit, so as soon as I record this, it's just gonna be out yet. So let's see how this fares and if we make any sense. So I put this meme up. Some people don't need Halloween, they put on costumes every day. And that is the conversation of the narcissist. If you listen to Coffee with Whiskeys or whatever, or hear me talk, you know that I don't really like the term narcissist, but I understand why it exists and lives. And I kind of want to talk about why I don't believe in that term like a little bit later. I want to talk about what it is to look into self-examination for healing and look at our terminology and what we call things, because I think society has a lot of names for certain things, but we have to be thinkers and look into how we define things. So to start off, for those who don't know, like you've been living under a rock, go look it up. Actually just type in hashtag narcissist or hashtag narcissistic abuse or anything along those lines, and a bunch of Instagrams will come up that will tell you everything you need to know. But for this, I am talking about narcissists in the sense of that idealized person that swoops into your life and gives you everything that you may ever want and need, and it feels so great and beautiful and yay for a while, but then they can't keep it up because they're not that person, and then the mask come off and you feel like you've been duped by someone who is not who they say they are, but psychologically you've been so drawn into the picture that they have painted for you that you just want to believe, or you spend your entire relationship with that person chasing to have that first feeling back. And once you are in that position, the narcissist is then in the position to control you and get whatever they want from you, depending on how desperate you are to chase after that initial love, affection, and attention. Now, I'm going to say some, I think, jarring things, but I feel like if people for real healing, it might be a pattern that you've discovered yourself and it makes sense. For me, this makes sense. And I will leave probably just like the one account because I don't like to leave all of my sources and shit because I'd be too lazy to put them together for real. But one account that talks about this, and she is a whole full-blown like licensed psychotherapist, I believe, but I don't want to misquote that, is Loving Me After We. Her account is amazing. And I believe, especially since most of my trauma has come from mentally abusive, emotionally abusive relationships with narcissists, then I feel like she has a really good approach about what it looks like to do the work as far as examining yourself and seeing how you may have contributed to your own demise, narcissistic abuse situation. Hear me out, hear me out, hear me out. If that triggered you and you thought to yourself like, oh no, a nigga played me or they played me or clearly it's the narcissist fault and blah blah blah, then maybe you are not ready for this video. I'm looking at the stuff that I'm putting out is intermediate stuff, and when I say intermediate, I say that kind of cheekily because healing doesn't really have a thing where it ends. We're always going to be healing and progressing and trying to be better people, especially as the world becomes a more shitty place. We'll have to step up more. So when I say intermediate level, I really just mean the part of the course where you're really ready to move forward to the internal work. I think there's a lot to do with the healing process, with the self-examination of what it is to be a better person. And I think that when it comes to externally, it's very easy to look at the external forces that come together that made you a shitty person, right? But then I do think that there's a part of the journey where you look inward so deeply, and it actually becomes part of your awakening process, part of what it is to be conscious, and that self-awareness. And that is doing the deep work inside of yourself, to see like where you fucked up and where you've wandered into situations with narcissists that maybe you could set some boundaries and do some things to show up better and to deal with less bullshit, because we live in this world, you're going to deal with bullshit, but there are ways that you can try to deal with less bullshit. Before I get into that, and I'm going to be brief, I do want to say that narcissistic abuse is real. When I talk about terminology and why I don't like it, I would say because this, and you can do your research on this. I like to think a lot, but I like to research a lot, but in part of why I release these blogs, like I said, is just to show people that you can think in your mind and come to your own conclusions. So this is not anything that's like, oh, I am a scholar in this field. No, I'm just a thinker, and I'm actively thinking about what it means for me to heal. So when it comes to narcissism, I don't like that terminology because it is closely associated with what's in the DSM-5 known as Narcissistic Personality Disorder. And if you look that up, yes, there are some of the same characteristics, but that's a personality disorder, and it is characterized by lack of empathy, I believe, and it's closely related or in the same kind of like vein with sociopathy. So it's kind of like when you're looking into your fucked up relationships with regular ass fuckboy that you probably should have just used a little more discernment before going in there, spotted the red flags and got rid of a nigga instead of diagnosing him with an actual personality disorder. I think we need to look at the way that we were raised and socially conditioned, and especially in the patterns that I've looked at in myself. Well, I'll get to that later, but emotional abuse is real. Narcissistic abuse is real. I just think we use the wrong terminology. I think it's just that we are in a world of manipulators and users, and this is literally how we've socially conditioned ourselves to date each other, especially in the Black community. So I understand where the buzzword comes from and we want to blame something, but really it's just how we've social conditioned ourselves, capitalism, all the ways that we've set up these bullshit systems, specifically here in America, it's all just being thrown up in our faces. And because we've been used to gaslighting ourselves, we're trying to gaslight ourselves into believing it's something else. But why do you think so many people are having issues with narcissists? It's because we're all the narcissists. Some more insidious than others, and I will hold space for that. And in my holding space for that, I will just talk about a few bullet points of what I've dealt with and had to heal from in my relationships when it comes to emotional abuse. And keep in mind that these were the main factors that were in place. And I actually had to start to talk to men and let them know how you've been taught to court is pretty insidious. You're pretending to be someone else, and then you're swooping in as that person, then slowly letting your guard down and turning into a whole nother nigga. And I get how that makes sense as far as like getting the woman that you want, but that is that's lying, guys. It's like, what if you just root it down into the person that you are and then see what you actually like and then go after that? But you know, I'm spitting too much. Anyway, identifying emotional abuse is a thing, and some of the things that I've dealt with is financial abuse. I've dealt in situations where niggas act like they don't have no money, but what they really mean is they ain't got no money for me. Financial abuse goes as surface as that is the treatment of how their money is versus your money. There is the bullshit 50-50 thing, but if you stay woke, it's kind of like you're paying 50-50 into the bills, and you're giving all the emotional nurturing. You're the only one who gives a fuck about the relationship. Anyway, that's a tangent. Don't let me get my tangent. But financial abuse ranges from just like a difference in how money is looked at and how money is used to control your actions in a relationship. It can be high value men or men who have money who expect you to enter in a relationship with them where they gift you and you do things in exchange. Or financial abuse can be like someone having your credit card or access to your financials and abusing it that way. Yeah, so I won't get into that without getting into my personal business. But gaslighting is my major thing. I hate gaslighting, and gaslighting is really, you should look up the original terminology because it's based on a movie called Gaslight, where I guess a man was trying to make his wife believe that she was crazy by doing all sorts of fucked up shit in the house. And I don't remember why, so I think you should look that up. But I love that this is the term and that we put a name to it. It's so funny. I had a job a couple years ago, and I worked with a lot of men, and I showed them the definition of gaslighting, and watching them kind of be like, no, that's not a thing. No, yes, it's a thing. And I think why this terminology coming to light, it hit the male community so hard, because they're like, well, shit, that's what we do. Gaslighting is basically where you create your own reality. And an example, and most of my examples are relationship examples because that has been my major healing thing. But I will say that the traumas I've dealt with in relationships have cycled into other relationships, business partner relationships, friendships, and anything that I have gotten myself involved in. I have to be mindful of these things. So my major thing is in relationships, and a prime example is a nigga who don't get your text messages. You didn't get my text the third time this month, and all of my text messages are going to everyone else, but they're not going to you because you got it. And instead of saying, I was busy, I didn't want to answer, I'm not interested in you, whatever the thing may be, instead of owning up to the truth of that, or upgrading your phone so that you get text messages from a bitch you're fucking or whatever the relationship is, instead of that, that person is choosing to alter the reality. The problem is that we live, and I won't get into my whole woke soapbox. You can join the Patreon and hop on the Stay Woke series for that. But the whole thing is that we are socially conditioned to do this. And the bigger picture is, especially for Black people, look at the country that we are in, where we can't even teach critical race theory because that's the truth. And we don't want to teach the truth because the truth means it's wrong bad. So we're in an environment where if the truth makes you look bad, you can bend it a little bit to whatever you want. And, kids do this a lot. My daughter does this a lot. And I get so upset because it's gaslighting. And when you get to the heart of gaslighting, you realize that we get so caught up in what it is to bend our reality that we do it so much we believe the lie. And that's why there's so many jokes about like niggas crying or being upset, like when they get caught doing stuff. And it's like, but you did it. And it kind of distracts from the conversation because they're so upset that they got caught. That is gaslighting. That is them altering the reality. And you, after a while, I think that we're socially conditioned as well to stay in relationships, to hang in there. So after a while, when you stay in a relationship or in a situation where you know the person's lying to you, your brain is going to protect yourself and tell yourself something else so that you can stay in the situation. So when it comes to gaslighting, it's usually the person lying to protect themselves, and then they begin to believe the lie in you because you have your own reasons for being there, or you have a pattern of dealing with gaslighters and allowing people to alter your reality. You stay in this relationship, and next thing you know, you're under a system of learned helplessness, Stockholm syndrome, trauma bonding, whatever you want to call it, where this person is creating your reality. I do not fucking like gaslighting. That is everyone needs to stay in their fucking realities and understand from a psychological standpoint that there are people who stay in their reality as far as everyone has their reality. But when you come together to tell the full story, it should be this person's perspective, your perspective, and you should be able to come to some common ground of understanding. But if there's an offshoot of reality, that shit is of the devil to me. I'm sorry that you could just create some other shit and be like, no, this is what happened. No, nigga, it wasn't. Pet peeve. Cheating is serial cheating is can be narcissistic abuse, as far as that person doesn't value enough to even stay faithful. People who struggle with monogamous relationships are a thing, but maybe you should get into polyamory or sitting your ass down or figuring it the fuck out. But you don't need to be making false promises in a relationship where you cannot commit to the agreement at hand. So serial cheating is the decision to choose me over you, and not in the way. You have to look that there's always something, there's always goodness, and there's always an evil counterfeit. So when it comes to self-love, yes, you pour into yourself first, you choose yourself first, you choose God in that relationship first, and then you have more to pour into other people. Narcissism is really like the counterfeit of that, and it looks like self-love. I'm gonna take care of my needs first and blah blah blah. But if you believe you're an animal and you can't be monogamous, don't get with a monogamous woman, because oftentimes that comes with a control element where it's like, I want her to be monogamous to me, but I'm going to do what I want to do because this is part of how I love myself. You got to watch that with these like with these artsy niggas. I'm just saying, not to call nobody out. And I'm speaking from my perspective as a woman, but of course, these are just people that we're dealing with. People suck nowadays. I cannot express that enough. Anyway, minimization, devaluation is a thing of narcissists too. It's part of, if they swoop in as the ideal person and they're building you up, and yes, we love you, and you're usually like spouting that back into, and there's that exchange, but next thing you know, the person's not giving you the same thing. I've had this in a lot of my relationships where they come in the door hot, like, oh yeah, we love us some whiskey, yeah. And it's like, why do you do that like that? And I always chalked it up to being a confusing personality, because if you meet me outside of the creative world, I'm just like a nerdy Black woman, like unassuming, and I can't stress this enough, that I'm just a regular ass looking woman. And it's really cool to be seen in the creative world. It's like, people are like, oh, you're beautiful, your energy and stuff. And it's like, yeah, makeup, filters, long baths, and sitting with God and meditations and stuff. So it's just kind of like, once I'm in a relationship, if they see me in the creative world and how things go down there, it is like a cognitive dissonance. Like, I thought you were a regular ass bitch. So I always chalked it up to, okay, they don't know how to handle me in this world versus me like at home in my drawers or whatever. But I started to realize minimization would start to happen. And that's why I always say, like, one of your things on your list of your mates or whoever you want around you should be high self-esteem. You should be around people who know how to celebrate you. And minimization comes from usually the shit they pop in the door with praising you about, then they start to minimize that. Another way, if you're really, really good, you can spot minimization is what people are not saying. Do they never praise you? Do they never have anything encouraging to say? Do they never pour into you as you pour into them? Some of those are ways. And then devaluation is just like that hot cold, that yay, I'm in your face, I want you, this is great, oh my God, and then kind of like pulling back from there. And I'm not saying that all of these are what narcissists do. They're just red flags that you should look into and kind of peep how people move, and be aware that this stuff is going on. And another, sign of narcissism is just like controlling behavior. So these are all things that we all associate with narcissism. There's that one meme that you see everywhere, just like, oh, words not matching actions, honey, we're talking abuse. It's like, are we? Or is that just what everyone does? Because we've been socially conditioned to do so. And there's a lot on us. So we're not going to make all the things that we're supposed to make. We're not all going to be good friends. We're not all going to be good workers. We're not all going to be hitting it so hard in all of these fields. So are we looking at narcissism for what it is? Or are we just pushing it back to blame people for the way we are? I want to look at this because on the interwebs, the thing is, if you've dealt with narcissistic abuse, well, before I move on to that, I will say, It is a psychological process to heal from narcissistic abuse. That is a real thing. And I think it should be aided by therapy. Absolutely. Because if you're dealing with someone who's altered your reality, you've lost a major sense of yourself. And when you look into how trauma lives in the body and how if your brain is not calculating what's happening to you, then it will show up other places. And that has been my work with tackling anxiety, and just being not in my body. That has been my healing from this type of emotional abuse. So I will say that's a very serious thing. And I see the value in all of these Instagram accounts that talk about it, that put it out there, that give you the red flag warnings and signals. Yes, that needs to happen. But the thing I see or think about a lot is healing is not linear and it does not fucking end. And at a certain point, we should be tracking our growth internally, obviously, because the internet's accessible. You can't really see anyone's growth on there. That's why I try to do these blogs to show like, oh, in the Patreon, show like, oh no, like happiness is something that I am choosing. Happiness is something that I get to experience in spite of the bullshit that is life. We have to show the true pathway of healing, right? And the true pathway is that you have to move on from the blame game. And this is tough for me to say because I would see those tough love messages be like, they don't know my story. And it's like, no, bitch, you got to heal from that. At a certain point, you have to own your shame. You have to look at all the red flags that happen, figure out how you're going to do life differently so you're not just wandering into the arms of narcissists all the time. So I do believe there is a space for that where people should be able to come online, find that commiseration and heal from abuse in a collective way. But after a while, I realized I needed to mute those accounts, unfollow those accounts, and do the deep healing work. And once I started doing that, deep healing looks like you're the problem. I promise you, you're the problem. You're the problem. You're the problem. It's you. It's your fault. You. Yes, other people, because this is the way we are. Everyone has free will, and people are going to dick you over if they have the chance to dick you over, because that's just what we on sometimes. But the problem is most likely you. I don't know how else to put that. And I hope that you're mentally ready for that work, because that's what the deep healing work is. The narcissist empath relationship has been so romanticized, and I just want to strip it down and say like it's just regular ass codependency. It's someone who needs validation and someone who gets their validation by validating other people, and you put them together and they just love each other. And what we don't realize is that because the empath is known as the more soft-hearted person, they are the person that gets to escape with the story of like, oh my God, I was abused and blah, blah, blah. My work has really been in what's kind of like accelerated, honestly, my healing. And I say all of those words as far as timing cheekily, because the acceleration, like I've been a hot piece of mess for years now. So there is no acceleration. But the thing that has, I guess, really helped me in my healing journey is the realization that we're all mirrors and that we're usually around people who are similar to us. Not on no law of attraction shit, but just on like, if you look, we're all mirrors of each other. The way that God works, the way that we are interdependent, the way that we usually like fuck with people that we admire because they have things in us that we would like to bring out, or we just like fuck with them. So there is like that narcissistic element of our interpersonal relationships in all of my or just a polarizing counterpart in all of my romantic relationships. A bitch loves a polarizing counterpart. I feel like I'm on my shit. I want somebody who's on their shit, on some king shit. And I went in the wrong direction with that, because I just kind of associated aggressiveness with king shit, but we're back on track. But anyway, all that to say is that the narcissistic empath relationship has been romanticized, and it's really just codependency at its finest. And when you look into I think the book is just called Codependent, and it's so good, right? But when you look into it, it's about your individual experience. And though the deeper part of healing is discovering how you are the problem, I think the good news is that you can be the solution. It's easy for you to set boundaries with people. But with that comes change in your inner work. And as I was saying, what accelerated mine was being able to realize that these people I brought in my life were somehow a mirror of me. So I really did an examination of all of my ex relationships and things that I could not stand about them. And I examined how I was possibly showing up that way, possibly mirroring that. And I'll give an example. In most of my relationships, there's been a lingering ex on the nigga side, right? And it's just some woman that's like asterisk, like, what the fuck is this? And I understand that. I think in modern day relationships, we all understand that there's going to be some bullshit. And I didn't even, there's so many layers to this because I am like pretty laid back and I want people to be free and I understand how life works. So I've always been like lenient about like the extra friend or ex-girlfriend or whatever laying around. But in the end, it has come back to bite me as far as being like a cheating situation or exactly what I thought it was. And that was something crushing that I had to deal with, something that I took on me and just, you know, had two whole phases trying to get over. Let me wrap this up. Trying to get over. So basically, I had to examine those relationships and realize that I either was energetically dealing with an ex as far as like still holding one in my heart, hadn't got over the hurt and pain of that situation, or like for the past like I won't say how long. There's been like a nigga who just won't go away. And at times I've been trying to be soft about like, you know, but I had to examine it myself where I have kept him there because it's just kind of nice to know that a nigga is going to be outside your window with a boombox, just like caping for you. The problem is he can cape for a bitch when he's in my presence, but when he's gone, he's MIA. So am I really getting love out of this or is this an ego thing? And this is just someone that I have lingering around because they make me feel good and I can call them out of the archives when I need to healing. Anyway, so I had to realize that although I was dealing with these men and holding space for the fact that they had extra shit with their exes in the background, I had to get to the space where I realized I was so lenient and I didn't set a boundary with those situations because I had shit with my exes in the background. So me trying to hold space for this was really me covering up the fact that I had my own shit with exes. When you look into this narcissism thing, you have to get to the root of it. The idea, right, is that narcissists usually grow up coddled, they're spoiled, they get everything they want with no to minimum bad consequences. And then they get into the real world and they try to have the same thing happen and control and manipulate for their happiness in the same way. And the empath, oh, we love an empath. The sweet little empath was just emotionally neglected and no one loved them. And they just, you know, sat on the sideline growing all these superpowers of tuning into everyone's emotions and learning how to love on people and meeting their needs. And they just wander into these relationships where they're controlled and bullied by their narcissist. No, no, no. And I say that as a person who has had that story, right, of being a very sensitive child and dealing with something that went into emotional neglect, but not because my parents meant to. It's just like if you were raised by a baby boomer, like God help us all. They didn't know what the fuck they were doing. But all that to say, we romanticize the empath portion of that relationship because we want to make the person and we want to make ourselves the hero. And when you escape a situation where somebody did you wrong, you want to blame, make that person the villain and make yourself the hero. Plot twist, we're all the villains in somebody's story. So whenever I get super offended, I just remind myself like, oh yeah, we all suck. And then I do self-examination and look at how I suck. And then I get so distracted by how I suck and what I can fix that I just forget about the other people. That's how it should be, because that's the only thing you can control. And when you do the deep work on yourself and start putting goodness into the world, then you can be an example of how other people can go into their self-examination, because you can't control other people. So with that, you know, I have that story of the empath, but my theory is this: we're interdependent. God is not playing around. And when We learned in the pandemic, being 6 feet away from people, staying in our own energy, just how much we deal with other people's energies and how that affects us. So when it comes to saying that narcissists don't have empathy, it's just not true. When it comes to saying that, oh, they just don't feel and they do these things out of a cruelty, no, if you look at the empath and the narcissist, it's the same thing. Right. I think a lot of narcissists just turn into, the good people. How do I know? Because I have. I am. Or I'm trying, because I'm still a narcissist. I still struggle. And that's why I get on lives and get angry. That's why the people who work with me behind the scenes know that, I could be snippy when I'm in a bad mood. When working with creatives this year on this level has been tough, because my arrogance comes from like, I'm an artist too. I know how this shit works. These niggas not about to play me with this bullshit. But then I have to just look at it. It's like, okay, you are an artist, but now you're in events. So if this is what artists want and need to be better in events so they can be higher selves, and bitch, look at where you can compromise and provide better. It's not about you and your ego. When it comes to empaths, if we create that story that you were abused and none of this was your fault, and that person is the narcissist, then we prevent a lot of healing that can happen. When it comes to empathy, we cannot believe that some people are empaths and other people are not. We can all feel each other's energy. It's just whether you tune it out or not. I feel that external people, extroverts, have an easier time with empathy as far as not letting it on them. I think as far as introverts, we absorb so much that it's something we take inward and we ruminate on. It becomes a part of our inner world. And I think it's just a difference in how we view the world and interact with the world. But all of that to say, the key to the empath healing is boundary setting. Yay, the end. No. The key to an empath healing from narcissism is to look at how you've been the narcissist. And I say this because that's how my deep healing has taken place. I've literally examined all of these bullet points, especially like the financial abuse, the gaslighting, the cheating, the minimization, control, not so much the financial abuse, because I'm a strong Black woman and I don't need no man to take care of my bills or whatever. I have a problem with receiving. So that's never been a thing. But the gaslighting, I had to look into how I gaslight myself. How do I lie to myself to allow myself to be in these situations? And also, how do I gaslight the situation to control and manipulate a narrative with other people? I think in looking at larger systems, especially like the system of white supremacy in America, you can see a pattern of how abusees can become the abusers. And that's something I think that Black people have to watch, because if you're down on the totem pole of where all the abuse is being trickled down from the bottom up, you can see all the insidious systems, and if you're not conscious, you can fall right into them, because if you're being oppressed under a system, you are more likely to repeat it. That's why Black love relationships look like patriarchy. That's why, we're in this wave of Black men being like, submit, damn it, and Black women being like, hypergamy. That's patriarchy. It's patriarchal bullshit that we are trying to recreate and call it and put Black on it, like we put trap on everything to make it Black. Like, is this trap patriarchy? Is this trap love? I don't know what the fuck it is, but we need to wake up and not love this way. So gaslighting is something that we are socially conditioned to do. And when I looked at it as a wider issue, as like, how do I lie to myself? How do I gaslight myself? And how do I gaslight other people under the guise of, oh, this is a little white lie, so it doesn't mean anything, or I'm just bending the truth. Bending the truth is not truth. That's why my Instagram feed, it says on my bio, it says truth teller. I used to say storyteller, but that sounded like I was a liar. So, and I thought a lot about putting truth teller, because I was like, bitch, if you put truth teller, you have to tell the truth. But I was like, you basically gave yourself a cutie mark of accountability. Like, it says memento mori on my shoulder, which is Latin, remember you will die. And to me, that means like, yes, live life to the fullest, but also remember you be held accountable for how you behave here. And we do ourselves a disservice when we leave situations where like, oh, I was a victim, they were the villain, blah, 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 the end. we know that life is not that simple. So when it comes to healing from narcissistic abuse, I think the second phase is really looking into how have you been the narcissist? How have you showed up as the asshole in all of your situations? And when I was saying earlier about the difference between growing up coddled versus growing up emotionally neglected, you can have the same path of growing up as an adult and controlling the narrative to get what you want. Whether you're the soft little empath kid who was so, you learned ways to people please, you learned ways, or may have, I'm just talking about myself. I learned ways to people please. I learned ways to abandon myself to become what other people wanted me to be for likability. That's not authentic. So when it comes to narcissism, the whole thing is the mask. There is the mask of inauthenticity and then who the person is behind the mask. And I would implore us all, if we consider ourselves the hero, the victim, the empath, to look at who we are behind our mask, because you best believe we all have them. When it comes to journaling prompts, I did say I want to make this brief. So I will say this, look into ways you have shown up narcissistic in life and in relationships. All of the bullet points about narcissists, all of the bullet points about these invalidators and people who just fuck you and the haters and stuff. Look at times you have been the hater. Look at times you've been these people, times you have devalued people and minimized. And another thing is that understanding who people are and not taking these bullet points to heart, using it as a tool to help you. But also we have to think when it comes to boundary setting, when it comes to, y'all know I'm an energy snob and I can't just be anywhere because that's just part of me being like a loner and a curmudgeon and all that other stuff. But some things that I do, I show up narcissist is not coming from that place. One of the things is I know I'm a hard person to get to know. I'm a hard person to build a friendship with. But if you're around me, like I'm gonna love on you and we're gonna talk and blah, blah, blah. And I think I've run into this is that people meet me as whiskey, and I am whiskey, but also it's like I have my so I think that, coming off as like a friendly type, and I am friendly, but it's hard for me to cultivate friendships with everything that I have to do in my life. So it's really hard for me when I meet people out, especially I meet women and we vibe and, we have these innovative sessions and I'm talking, I'm like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And we're all like, I'm getting better about not being like, we should do this because I'm just throwing out ideas into the atmosphere, but I'm not really. So that's my narcissistic work. But if I'm hanging around, I meet somebody new and I'm like, we're all just like loving on each other and it's great. And then they're trying to follow up and be my friend and hang out again. I just don't have that time or energy to give. It makes me look like a narcissist. I look like an asshole. There are ways that I show up as an asshole. I'm very hard on myself. And sometimes the way I pick apart myself helps me to grow and be better. So people who are in my inner circle, I do the same thing to them. I'm like picking things apart and shit. And that's not always, it looks like something that's narcissistic. There are always ways that we show up and controlling behavior. Like I've been spending a lot of time in my masculine as a mom. And it is convenient for me to try to control the narrative, especially as a damaged woman, to make sure that I can have situations where I'm not going to be hurt. One of the major things that I struggled with having a show and opening up the show to everybody, is that I can't always be surrounded by people who just love them some whiskey. Sometimes it's going to be like niggas who don't fuck with you, but they're at your show for the experience. And like learning that stuff is like learning how to not be controlling, how to not be a gatekeeper. All of that stuff stems from the bullet points that we put down as these are narcissists. And like everyone's the narcissist. And that's what I mean when I say ego work. Ego work is dying to your ego, and not even a little bit of ego. There is a confidence that you should have. My confidence comes from knowing that God don't play about me. My confidence comes from knowing that, okay, if there's a higher being that loves me this much and has given me this life, then I should love myself because this is what I was given. So let me work. That's where my confidence comes from. And I think that that was a tangent. I just got all excited, like my confidence comes. I'm sounding like a little nerd, but that's okay. Oh, that's what I was saying. So yeah, when you have high confidence, when you start showing up in high self-esteem, it is going to look like narcissism to certain people. And it doesn't matter how you show up, you're probably going to show up as having narcissistic tendencies. It's because this is how we were socially conditioned to exist in this world, especially. That's how they control us, is having us in our ego and caring about these things. But when it comes to dying to ego, it comes to jealousy was one thing that I was able to thank God, or I would just have blown my brains out. And that's real talk, because the comparison on social media and stuff is crazy. Jealousy is something God helped me with early on. And then I keep jealous. The best way to fight jealousy, I think, is gratitude. And especially if you're a mom and you love your kids, if gratitude, like these kids that I have, they had to have been with their fathers. This is their genetic makeup. I'm so fucking happy. And the fact that I have my specific kids, how could I envy or be jealous of anyone else's life? When it comes to artistry, dealing with being on social media in a place where that's where we're supposed to consume and compare ourselves, we get caught into those traps. How do you deal with your jealousy? How do you deal with your ego? Especially when you start to get into what teamwork looks like, what it looks like working with other artists. How are you dealing with your ego? That's something you have to die to daily. And I will say, getting into the event space in a bigger way and wanting to continue with that. Stay tuned for Whiskey and Friends details and announcements. But I realized that being an artist and holding space for artists is that ego is something that I have to die to daily. As much as I thought I had a leg up on the competition, like, oh, I don't be jealous. I'm just so happy with my life. Ego is something you do have to die to. And I hate being so honest about that, like publicly, because then it looks like Whiskey be jealous of her. No, because when you get into curation, you start getting deeply into it. And I won't say too much because I have a Whiskey Nights podcast coming up about this topic with Nisho Soul. So stay tuned for that. But basically, inner curation is a thing. And when there is that type of energy at an event, people can feel it and it can fuck it up, especially if it's coming from the host and organizer. So I realized going into this and why it was a big deal, me taking on a whole consecutive show, would be like, do I have this in me to deal with, to manage all these personalities and to make sure that I'm on point, that I'm giving what I'm supposed to give? Because it's a fine line. It's a show where I open, so it's about me, and then it's immediately about everyone else. So figuring out how to have the balance of my ego, or is like, is that too much of me, too much promotion of me, or whatever, has been a learning lesson. And I think that that's something that we should all examine. How are you the villain? How do you show up in your ego, and how you die to that? How do you let it go? Because when you look at to higher purpose, especially creatives, we have such a high purpose and a high calling on this. Like, you just have to know the spiritual warfare that's wrapped up in entertainment, in music, in arts. If you look at Psalms, how God thinks of poetry, like this is like, there's a whole choir up there. Like, this is important to God. So when you think as far as spiritual warfare, if you think of all the things that are going to happen to try to derail you from your purpose, if you think of how Lucifer fell from heaven, that was jealousy and envy. That's the main thing that we all have to do our ego work on, because once you have that thought and feeling like we're all called to do this, so let everybody rock out, and you find ways to be supportive. And in the midst of that, there will be ways to figure out how to make it about you and grow your brand. So anyway, journaling prompts would be just questioning yourself, asking yourself, do you stay in reality? Do you stay in reality? What is your reality? What does reality look like to you? Are there situations that you've had where you feel like you weren't in reality, that someone's reality was different than yours? How can you examine that and look at it through the other person's shoes? Eyes, y'all know what I'm saying. That's empathy. Do you have integrity? Not integrity as far as like, I'm just an honest and good person. Most people are just like, yeah, I'm a good person because no one wants to be a piece of shit. I will tell you, I'm a piece of shit first, and I have to work to be a good person. Narcissistic thoughts come into my head immediately. And it's up to me to quell them. And what happens is it's a mindset change. Once you start to recognize thoughts as not your own, recognize thoughts as something out of the ego, then you can decide how you want to act. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to be a victim of the first thought that pops into your head. It's just usually a trigger or something to let you know this might be how you truly feel about it. But the person you want to be, how do you want to feel about it? And what's the connection between those 2 points, getting from here to here? And as you start doing that work, it becomes easier and more of just a flowing thing that happens. I'm not there yet. I think murderous thoughts all the time. How I've been handling it is just by being super transparent about it, because I want people to know, especially if the narrative is now that, oh, Whiskey and her great energy and she's so kind and nice, whatever. No. There's work that goes into this. There's no halo. Like, a bitch is ready to pop off 99% of the time. God is working on me. A bitch is not there yet, but I appreciate the folks that think I'm there. And I feel like that's between me and God, where I have to, like, okay, tell the full story of what this is, what the new energy is about. Like, if you feel like it's a pop out, it's all the glitter in the lighting, but it's God working on me and my ego, and me like going into the deep healing process. And it's not fun because I'm the problem, and I had this whole narrative that I'm the victim, and woe is me for being a sweet little empath that bad things just keep happening too. Integrity is deeper work. It's not just about, it's about, are your words matching your actions? And that was interesting work for me, because I realized that it doesn't mean you're a bad person if you don't have integrity. It just means you have work to do. And even for me, I realized that I'm a very loving person, and I hold it in a lot because people aren't ready for the intensity of my love. So I've since learned that to counteract that, I was a very sarcastic person, and a lot of people were like, we don't know how you feel. Like, you're giving good energy, but then you're kind of bitchy and sarcastic. So I have had to work a lot on showing up as loving as I am on the inside as outside. Integrity work is not necessarily you're a bad person. It's basically like, have you integrated all the parts of your life? Are you showing up the same in every aspect of your life? And who you are on the inside, does that reflect outward? And that's tough work for introverts to do, because we live so inward. Sometimes we think we're projecting things out that we're just not. And that was the hard work that I have to do. And then you deal with other aspects of like, once you start asserting your integrity, well, once you start working your integrity and showing up different, there will be so many obstacles in the way to get you back to that other person you used to be. For me, it's been the whole like, oh, are you kind? Challenge accepted. Are you here to love? Challenge accepted. And it's like, niggas really be like, well, let's test you by being a fucking asshole and see if you can handle it. And for me, it's always showing up as the person that I want to be, always showing up authentically in spite of these obstacles. And there are other shit that I'm working on, but I'm tired of being the villain all the time. Y'all know I ain't shit. And yeah, with that integrity, and how often do your words not match your actions? Before you read all the memes that are like, honey, we're talking abuse, you're probably abusive. Just saying, it trickles down, and that shit is hard. America's built on abuse. Are you kidding me? So ego work for me is sitting deeply with negative feelings and not gaslighting yourself. Sit with those feelings and figure out what the fuck they are. Figure out how deeply you go, how sick, sad, and disgusting you are. You cannot, and that's why we do these things. We watch these horror movies, we do all this shit. It's like a cathartic thing. Sit with how dark you are. And I think that it's interesting. I think being a person who's dealt with suicidal thoughts and suicidal ideations and fantasize, yeah, all of that stuff, I've always been aware of my darkness. And sitting in my darkness has been the best thing for me to be more of a light, because once I sit with how ugly I can go, I'm able to understand just how ugly it goes, and to hold empathy and space for people in situations that I would not thought I would have been able to. With that empathy comes boundaries, right? Because you're not just going to be like picnicking with a serial killer, but there are certain things that comes with sitting with the darkest parts of yourself. You understand humanity on a deeper level because you understand your own humanity and the limitations. So that's what ego work is like just the knowing of how much of a piece of shit you are before you're passing judgment on how other people are a piece of shit. And when you come across these negative feelings, examining them, getting curious about them, which is what Brene Brown says. And she's just like, you know, the gateway to healing. You got to check out Brene Brown. So you're sitting deeply with your negative feelings and thoughts. Break it down. Why am I jealous? Why did that harmless comment make me angry? Why am I angry? Angry is always a good emotion to uncover, because for me, or in what I see in psychology, I forget the term for it, but it's just like a covering emotion. It's usually something deeper that's covering that. And anger is just how it comes out. So whenever you're angry, that's a great emotion to get curious about and drill down into. Why am I feeling this way about this? And this one is a little dark, but I think it's a real thing, especially in how we do relationships. Would I kill myself if blank left me? Or is that an emotional manipulation? So yes, when I talk about getting deep, I talk about getting deep. I want us to be thinkers, and you can't just think externally about what other people have done to you without thinking about your own diabolical manipulations. And that was the thing, and why I talk so much on the Patreon to Black women, women about self-esteem, because when you have high self-esteem, you are less likely to manipulate and control. And one of the things accountability, Black women are holding themselves accountable. We are in a position to emotionally manipulate, and that's just one of our weapons that we have, because you know, men can punch us and shit, but women are able to emotionally manipulate. That has been my thing. I am aware that I'm capable of it. I think I was in a relationship recently where I was so aware that I was capable of manipulating and controlling the narrative that I just powered down into a person that was just like not bringing any like flirty feminine energy, because I was like, I don't want to manipulate. So I kind of like killed it with that. Like, so that's something that I've been working on. Knowing that I'm a writer, and knowing that sometimes you are given the right things to say, but if you say them in that situation, does that make you manipulative? I was all in my head about it and just like killed the polarity of that relationship because of it. So, but I do think that's an examination that all women should go through, or all women should think about. Now, I know that men emotionally manipulate. I've been their victim. I don't think they label it that. I think they label it dating. But I do implore that men kind of look into their dating practices and styles and relationships, and see the way that they have had the upper hand when it comes to emotional manipulation. Google emotional manipulation shit. I am about us thinking. I'm about us doing the research and the work. I'm not trying to drop a bunch of links to give you. No, you figure it out. That's where we take power over our own healing, and that's where we give ourselves a chance to show up for ourselves, knowing that we're literally doing the work and the research, and then weighing it upon something greater than just I'm absorbing this because the internet told me to. But it should really align with your core values. And then when you start getting to the real stuff, it should align with what you believe. It should align with God. It should align with greater purpose, with higher things. So yeah, look that up. So in conclusion, the narc versus empath relationship is just like the new version of codependent. And we cannot look at that as if there's no work for the empaths to do in these situations, because there's a lot of self-work beyond boundaries, beyond asserting boundaries. And if you look at it, if you're an empath, once you start asserting boundaries, you are going to feel like the narcissist. Plot twist. There's levels to this shit. That's why you can't just believe the internet. You have to like weigh things against your personal experience. So the new version of codependent is basically both people, the narcissist and the empath, are abandoning authentic versions of themselves in order to control an outcome. And most of the time, that's us chasing at the version of love that we think that we want. But when you look into what it is to truly love people, oh, that thing is, it's a lot. And when it comes to loving, it's a lot of loving that you have to do for yourself, a lot of onus that you have to take on for yourself. So plot twist, this is your work. Ain't nobody gonna do your work for you. And the worst thing that we do nowadays is hop into these relationships still wounded and haven't fixed our stuff. And then we hop into relationships, repeat the same patterns, and then want to cry narcissist. No, look at how you are the narcissist. Look at how you are showing up in your relationships, and look at how you could actually have, and I think I've done this, I can trigger a narcissist or trigger narcissistic tendencies by showing up wounded empath, showing up as I'm in this relationship for you to fix me and heal me. And then next thing you know, I'm trying to get therapy from this person, and they turn into a narcissist because, or a person with narcissistic tendencies, because they're just like, I can't really stand you, but I'm not in a place to leave you because you showed me you're so emotionally fragile. So I'll just breadcrumb you. Take care. Please don't kill yourself. Like, all of these things are very, very complicated. That's why you just have to, the only thing that you control, the only narrative that you have any inspiration over, any onus over, like where you and God sit down and like go through the writing, the whole script and everything, like work it out. That is your mindset in your relationship. And for me, as a person that's battled depression for a while, that was great news to learn that I can control the narrative. I can, what do they say? All the hippies. You could be the movie, the star of your own movie. The fact that it is a mindset change, and I find myself less like waving in the wind of, the shit that's happened to me, and more resilient, which, I was planning to take a hiatus until like the end of the year, because usually like I'm a wounded bitch and I need to process all the things that happen and all the stresses and stuff. But when it's time to heal, it's time to work, it's time to go out and do your purpose, then it's worth it learning the tools to bounce back. And for me, bouncing back has been doing the grueling work of looking at how am I the problem and getting in the habit of that. It's jarring work at first, but if you make it a habit, then you just have to stay on top of it. It's going to hurt your ego. You're going to hurt your own feelings. You're going to discover things about yourself that you don't like, but it is worth it to put on more, to put out more goodness and kindness and loving gentleness into the world, because that's what we need right now. We don't need any more narcissists. We've been so socially conditioned to be that way. So if you want to heal from narcissism, the best thing you can do is heal from yourself and your own bullshit. Anyway, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I hope you appreciate this video. Happy Halloween. If you like this kind of stuff, this is what I'm on in my Patreon. You can subscribe as low as $3 a month to check out these vlogs. At the $3 tier, I'm doing the Raising ABGs, and that's basically vlogs about raising my daughters as kind of an unconventional mom, raising awesome Black girls, not awkward Black girls, because so anyway, there's a lot of these, and then I have the Stay Woke series for the higher tiers. There's Whiskey Nights podcast, and a lot of these conversations surrounding around self-esteem, what it is to stay in your awareness, to stay conscious in this day and time. And this is not coming from any expert point of view. This is just coming from me and my life. Sometimes I'll bring in my artsy friends and we'll talk about it. And the reason why it's on the Patreon is because like, I'm just tired of consumption. The internet is for consumption, but I want thinkers. I want people who want to be part of a larger conversation, to join me in the cocoon. That sounds like a cult, but but if you're a thinker, you would know it's a cult. Okay, I think when it's time to end the videos, it just be time. when the cognac hits in the coffee, it's just time. So anyway, This is Whiskey Girl. It was great seeing you guys. Next time you see me, I will have glitter on my face. It doesn't matter if it's next year because I committed to glitter and this is where I am in my journey. It's gonna be everywhere. But this was a fun video to do. Make sure you like, comment if you're into it. And this is premiering Halloween. If you dig the vibe, November 1st starts the new month of content. And it's the best time to sign up for the Patreon. There's tons of healing content in there, other YouTube wormhole stuff that I've been into, the stuff that I'm reading, random photo shoots. And yes, it is very me centric, but with the idea that I'm a storyteller. So the way I present myself, it's really cool. I think people can just see themselves in it and get the healing from there. The cocoon, the Patreon is where I restore my self esteem because it is hard being a woman, a Black woman, showing up in the spaces as I do, being a woman, showing up as I do, all of these things there are, and I want to show people what it is to love on yourself, what it is to pour into your self-esteem. And then externally, you see how all of that love comes in and how it pours out and how it affects the art outward. Really, the Patreon has been such like a godsend because the transparency that I've been able to share there, I've been able to transport it into the external world and how it's shown up in my art and taking me all to new levels and heights and shit. So I'm a happy girl with my patrons. I have 17 now. I'm trying to get to 25. So not that I did this video as like a whole like join my Patreon, but you should join my Patreon. And if you don't want to, occasionally I'll leak some videos out like this one, just because I feel like the conversation on healing needs to be continued. And people need to share their personal stories in a way that is edifying, because I know we all get to that healing portion where we want to spread the good news and tell the whole world, but then we get a little judgy and then we start being like, what y'all need to do, and start acting like we're healed and elitist. And it's like, no, we all suck at any given time at all times. So just remember, you suck, I suck, and we're all working on it. This has been Whiskey Girl. Thanks for tuning in with the bonus. I guess this would be a Stay Woke series. I'm not sure, but whatever I label it, thanks for tuning in, and I appreciate you guys, and I hope you join me in the cocoon.